Record to this computer. Hey, welcome everybody again to the Q&A call. This is the Former Athlete Society. As always, I'm Adam Ringler. And if you're watching this, then you're part of our community already, which is super cool, super rad to me. My camera lighting's a little weird. Now my whole face is completely super bright. So um, that might happen during this, and that's fine, right? So I might go from dark shades of shadows to light, and that's because I am not in a studio. I am a real person, and I'm doing this from my kitchen. So, nonetheless, we have an excellent Q&A call lined up. Got a couple questions that were emailed in to me from people that can't attend live that wanted me to answer it on here because they're watching the recordings. So I thought I would read those off. Couple things before we jump into it. Let's see if I can do this. Sometimes I struggle with some levels of technology. So I want to welcome everybody again. Once again, every Thursday at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, we are doing these Q&A calls for this Skool community. So if you're part of the Former Athlete Society, number one, I thank you. But number two, you can always jump in here. I will answer your questions live. If for whatever reason you have a scheduling conflict, you can always email me at SKOOL school at adamringler.com, and I will answer those questions on our Thursday calls every single time we do these. So that is some of the housekeeping work that I need to make sure I do. We are going to do a screen share and give you guys a small little update. If you are wondering, if you tuned in on the Tuesday show or you watched the recording of Tuesday, you probably heard me when let's jump in here. Will this work? Tuesday was rough, everyone. I'm not sugarcoating it. Okay, I'm going to delete this, dismiss journal. You're probably watching this live. Okay, 41% recovery from last night to right now. That cough, oh my goodness, last 48 hours was absolutely tragic. Okay. But this recovery score, 41%, that is an uptick from yesterday. Yesterday, dun dun dun, I had a 1% recovery score. I was on the struggle bus yesterday and the day before. And if you tuned in on Tuesday, you probably heard it in my voice. I was starting to get a little sick. I started to feel a little under the weather. Was not. I talked about sort of on that accountability Tuesday call about how I was going to change my training up. See, here it is. I'm struggling even to talk. Really focus on good nutrition, being flexible with my training, considering that, here I was going to end up, you know, oh my goodness, I am struggling. Nonetheless, I had the day before 14%. I figured it couldn't get any worse than 14%. And then yesterday, a 1% struggle. So didn't train the last 2 days, pushed those training sessions to this weekend, really focused on sleep and getting great quality nutrients in my body and hydrating. And I'm starting to pull out of this sickness, even though I still have a lingering cough in all of this. So I'm going to stop mirroring and we will go back to our question and answer section. Stop sharing here. So I do want to jump in here. If I cough periodically, that's just me. I'm getting over this cold. I'm human. So a couple different things. Here's I got a few of these questions that were emailed in. How should former athletes like myself structure their training now that they're not competing? Well, that's a difficult question to kind of answer. My first thought is, what are your goals? What are you trying to do? So if you're not competing, let's say you're a former basketball athlete or a former volleyball athlete, former softball, whatever you might be, baseball. If you're not competing any longer, I would argue, what are you competing for in life? What is your goals? So I would ask you to sit down with a pencil and paper and write out what it is you wanted to accomplish this year, what do you want to accomplish maybe in the next 2 or 3 years? And then towards, as you're getting a little bit older, what are the training and things you want to do in your life that you want to stay with? So what I mean by that, let's say you're 35 and you want to be able to go and play with your grandchildren someday. You want to lift them up, you want to run with them, you want to go skiing with them. Then my answer to that would be we needed to do things in preparation to allow you to get to that type of goal, right? Where you can end up doing those things, you can end up facilitating those performance outcomes, right? So the that's where I would start with. What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? Now, how should you structure your training? We talked about the minimum effective dose, 2 conditioning days, 2 resistance days. I would say that for most of the people that I work with now that are former athletes, the largest caloric expenditure that they once had was that practice block, 2 to 3 hours a day of practicing at a pretty high intensity. And that accounted for a majority of caloric burn in their day. So, now as you're starting to age a little bit, you're no longer having 900, 1,500 calorie expenditure from practice. So you need to structure your training. Really, you need to structure your nutrition, but you need to structure your training in a way that still allows you to have some level of caloric expenditure throughout your day. So conditioning, absolutely. That's really important as you're starting to age. Resistance work from a bone mineral density standpoint, bone mass density, from a lean muscle mass, that's really important. So while I said those minimums being 2 and 2, in reality, the more that you can get, 4 and 4, if you can resistance train every single day and do some level of cardiovascular work every single day, that would mirror some of the level of physical activity that you most likely had during your playing days. It's more so now, just do you have the logistics to be able to do that? And that's a question that I can certainly help you on a one-on-one as far as putting together, looking at your work schedule, looking at your extracurriculars, what you might have from a family dynamic, and helping you put those pieces together. But as a broad stroke, it really depends on your life logistics, if you will. So another question that was emailed in, what are the biggest mistakes former athletes make when they're trying to stay fit post-college? Well, when you're 18 to 22 years of age, you can get away with a lot. You have a lot of metabolic flexibility. And what I mean by that, as I cough here and buy some time, my goodness, I am struggling today, but I'm showing up for you. What I mean by that is that you could get away with poor nutrition. You could get away with poor mobility. You could get away with poor flexibility. You could get away, most likely, probably drinking Tito's and doing Red Bull vodka shots on a Friday night and still show up and somewhat perform on a Saturday. Not at a high level, not at an elite level, but you could do those things. As you start to age, you age out of those things. Your body takes a bigger hit. It hurts more to do those things. So a lot of the biggest mistakes I see, it really happens here. It's a mindset of trying to live a lifestyle that was developed or cultivated in your early 20s and trying to hang on to that youth in your late 20s and early 30s. So you won't be able to get away with a poor nutrition as you age. You won't be able to get away with neglecting your mobility work or your flexibility work. You won't be able to get away with poor hydration and poor sleep. Those things compound over time and really affect your performance, affect your recovery, and ultimately affect your body. So it's really trying to hang on to those poor lifestyle behaviors later in life that I see as a huge mistake that a lot of former athletes make who think that they're somewhat invincible because they played sports. Um, I'm going to cough here, and that's just me. Sorry, guys. How can I balance training with the demanding work schedule? Well, I know I talked about this on another Q&A call, but there's only so many different ways that we can slice up the day, right? So you could train before work. So depending, let's just say a typical 9 to 5 training schedule, right? Or working schedule. You could train at 6 a.m., at 7 a.m., 7 to 8, you go home, shower, and get off to the office or be ready to go to work at 9 a.m. You could um, you could not take a lunch break, let's say. You could eat at your desk if that's something that you're allowed to do. And you could go leave in the middle of the day and go a 10 to 45 minute, hour long training session in the middle of the day if your work permits that sort of flexibility for a lunch break or so. You could train immediately post after work. So let's say it's you get off at 5, maybe you got a flexible work schedule, you can get off at 4:30 and go attend the gym afterwards, and you could train then. The biggest thing I often see with people is, as athletes, we're somewhat self-sacrificing in a lot of different ways. So we're willing to sacrifice our bodies for sport, for performance outcomes, for whatever it means. And sometimes we get so driven mentally with competing at work that we sacrifice our own health at the expense of that. And so I see a lot of former athletes enter into their professional work life and they sacrifice their own health care for professional gain, competitiveness, because that's where they're competing now. And so ultimately, the challenge then becomes is that, then their health takes a toll because of this professional sacrifice. So my biggest recommendation for you in this aspect is do not neglect your personal health. Do not neglect your training health, right? Carve and dedicate time for yourself to be able to go and do these things because you deserve it. You need it. You absolutely should be doing those things. Um, let's see. So what are some key nutrition strategies for maintaining athletic performance without two-a-day practices from college? Okay, so great question. Nutritional strategies, right? So if you're not practicing, listen, we don't have to show up. We might do an open gym. We might play pickup games, church league, softball, whatever it might be that you do. If you're still competitive in a way, um, the biggest things to really still focus is, my goodness, this cough is so persistent, is the sound nutritional advice that you probably did back in the day. So it would be things like your, prioritizing your protein intake. So again, talk to as a minimum for every 1 pound of body mass that you weigh, we should be getting at least 1 gram of protein. 200-pound athlete, 200 grams of protein. 150-pound athlete or former athlete should be getting 150 grams of protein. So I'd start with protein as um a bare necessity of achieving that macronutrient target. So that's one. Second, I would dictate my carbohydrate intake based on the activity that I do that day. So if it's a very physically active type of day, then and maybe your job dictates some of that, like if you're working more manual labor or you're doing something that's very physical, then you're going to need more carbohydrates throughout your day. I try to generally recommend carbohydrates as a fuel source. So if you're not driving your car, you don't need a lot of fuel. It's sitting in the driveway. You're cool with that. However, if you are driving that vehicle either very fast or very far, then you're going to need a little bit more carbohydrates. You're going to need more gasoline or fuel in that vehicle. So allowing our physical activity to dictate what type of carbohydrates or the quantity in which that you're consuming. That would be my two biggest recommendations. Other than that, having some flexibility in your nutrition, so that's the biggest things I would see. And then making sure that when we talk about this teeter-totter scale of calories in versus calories out, obviously, if we're not having a lot of calories expenditure coming out because of a lack of physical activity or because of lack of no longer participating in 2-hour practices or two-a-days or things like that, then the other side of that continuum needs to balance out. And that's our calorie intake in our body. So there's two levers that we can kind of pull. Intake, we can adjust that and try to minimize some of that intake if that's necessary, or we could try to increase the physical output, i.e., calorie expenditure through physical activity. So pulling on those two levers would probably be my recommendation that I would say. Let's look at our timeline. How are we doing on time? We're about 16 minutes in. How do I stay motivated to train without a team environment? And this is a question I answer all the time. And this is why I coach. This is what I do. I try to help people. I try to provide some motivation. I try to provide some accountability structure to former athletes. I try to provide those daily or weekly check-ins so that there is that accountability piece and that motivation piece to it all. Because quite frankly, that's something that is so unique about college sports. That's why I love college sports, is that it's a team environment. You have people to the left and to the right of you that are counting on you, that's depending on you to make a play, to show up, to be there, to do your job, to do what you're supposed to do. And then you lose that when you graduate or age out of sport. So, I try to provide that same team camaraderie when we work together. And so, um, if that's something that sounds intriguing, if that's something that sounds like you're missing, then again, one-on-one with me, we can figure this out. I can help provide you some of that accountability, that motivation that you need. But otherwise, I would just say, you know, motivation's a tricky thing. You can be self-motivated, which is really important. So you have this goal, you know what you're going to do, you manifest this goal, you write it down, you make it visible, you make it public, you count it down, you track your progress towards it. Let's say it's a marathon that you want to run and you're charting this out, running. That's one way. You could, quite frankly, I do this all the time, is that when I set a goal, I often share my goal with others, right? And then that creates some accountability for me, right? When I publicly state it, right? And I say, hey, let's say it's my brother. Hey, Ryan, I'm going to do this in 6 months from now. I want you to check in with me every month. Ask me how my goal is coming. And then that creates a little bit of, I'm on the hook now. I've told somebody about this. I'm putting myself out there, and now somebody else knows what my goal is. So I can't give up on myself. I have somebody checking in on me, or at least it makes it sting more when I don't do a workout or I don't show up to do what I publicly stated that I was going to do. And so that's something I often do is, I heard Tim Ferriss talk about, goal setting, and he talked about creating some stakes, five, like, hey, to my brother, hey, I'll give you $20 if I don't do this. I'll give you $100. It needs to be pricey enough that it stings, right? Hey, if I run this marathon, you don't have to do anything. This is just me. But if I don't run it, I owe you $300. And so there's some stakes to it. It keeps me engaged. It keeps me on the hook. Like when you're motivated enough to set a goal and you set it, create some external stakes at the end of it to keep you engaged on it so that you don't withdraw from that goal when the motivation and the fire is no longer there, right? So whether it's, like let's say it's a body composition change, right? Um, you could, before and after pictures. That's something that's quite common, right? You could say, hey, my goal is to change my body in 6 months and I want to lose 15 pounds, right? You could give your pictures to your best friend or something and say, hey man, in 6 months, share this, right? And if my body hasn't changed, then so there's some public accountability, there's some stakes there. I think that's really important to do, to help set some of these goals so that your mind doesn't twist and warp your goal setting and allow you to retreat from what you set out to do. I want to answer one more of these before my voice completely gives out. boy, let's see. Let's see. There's so many in here. What's the best way to prevent injuries now that I'm a little older and I'm no longer training as intensely as before? Well, let me tell you, injuries are crazy, especially as we get old, right? Like now, the body is pretty resilient, but it's not as resilient as you once was when you're 18 to 22 years of age. So, what I would say is a few things. Number one, we need to train. Like, listen, this is why the Former Athlete Society exists. It's a training program, it's a health program. And we're here to help set up training for you, right? To give you the tools, the education, and the actual training programs for you to take care of your health, right? We talked about that in my introduction to the Former Athlete Society. The top participating community member will receive free training from us through our Bridge Athletic Training app. So you'll get free training. That's a starter. There is a free training program already. If you progress through the onboarding, that there's a 3-day full body split routine that is customized just for this community, the Skool community here at Former Athlete Society, so that you can have a performance and an injury mitigation program for your health now that you're getting a little older. But in addition to all those things, we need to be sensible with our training. You also have to have some self-awareness and listen to our body. So that's one thing that as I've gotten older, I've had to be really diligent about is knowing when to when to slow down, when to take a day off, when to not push things. And what I mean by that is if my left shoulder is a little achy and I'm bench pressing and I want to go for a PR or I want to chase a heavy weight. Let's say I was trying to get 325 on bench. My left shoulder feels off. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to live to see tomorrow. So what I mean by this is that you can only cook a steak once. And if you burn it, it's done. But if you undercook it, you at least have the opportunity to reheat it the next day or to put it back on the grill and cook it again. And so I often say it's better for us to abandon a training session or abandon a PR or move away from that and save it for another day so that you can have frequency of showing up day after day, training session after training session, rather than trying to push it, which is what I would often do when I was younger. And then I would hurt and I would ache and I would be sore and I'd be in pain. So we have to train a little wiser. We also have, like when we think about 30 something year olds, right? Like Achilles are huge. This is the number one sort of age demographic where we start to see Achilles injuries. So being smart, being sensible, making sure that we're still training plyometrics and elasticity throughout our Achilles and our calf complex and our foot complex, because we need to make sure that that stays intact, not neglecting our mobility work. So like ankle mobility, hip mobility, thoracic spine mobility. So a lot of rotational T-spine extension flexion, a lot of triplanar hip mobility exercises to increase mobility of our hips, ankle range of motion. So a lot of dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. Cough, I swear. Ankle mobility work is really important as we get older. And then obviously I have flexibility work. But again, all of this comes under the umbrella of we just need to continue to train. We need to continue to keep working and training and getting better. So my voice is going at this point. I am feeling better, but I'm sure by next week, this cough will be gone. The flu symptoms will be gone. I had a fever like crazy. But I'm excited to still jump on these calls, still be able to be here with you guys and to share some advice for this Former Athlete Society. As always, we do these Q&A calls every Thursday, 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So you might be at work, maybe you can tune in. You might not be if you're West Coast athletes. Maybe you're around the world. I don't know. But again, just as a as a introduction, this former athlete society is for college athletes. It's my school community. Obviously, if you're watching this already, you know that. However, this is for former athletes that want to reclaim their physical performance from their glory days, right? So, yeah, as you already know, but as we age out of college athletics, we lose that accountability, we lose that structure, we lose that somewhat discipline that college sports provides. And that's what I want this society to be able to provide for you. So in it, we have our Thursday Q&A calls, we have our Tuesday accountability calls, we have our monthly masterclass calls, we'll have more one-on-ones. Every single day, I'm recording new materials for you, educational content centered around fueling your health, your body, how to recover, mentality, that applied sports psychology, and training. So all of this is a very holistic lens of athlete development, of human development, of performance development, and it's dedicated to just former athletes, those that are a little bit older, that have left their glory days and playing days and now entered into their professional days. So if that sounds like you, this is my advertisement to you. That sounds like you. I want you to head over this way to skool.com and check out Former Athlete Society, enroll. Here's the kicker. For the first 10 people that join this community, it's going to be forever free. You will get this. You will be essentially grandfathered in for free forever. And as long as you continue to participate, you will get access to the leaderboards, to the online curriculum, and you might even win the perks. You might even win the rewards of free training. So you're already in the community and you get access to things just by your participation. Now, after those first 10 community members, we're going to move to a monthly subscription. And what this will be a monthly price to be a community member. So all this educational content, all of these Q&A calls, all of these accountability check-ins, the monthly master classes, all of this will be behind a paywall. So it's advantageous to join right now to get in this Skool community early, because then you get it for free. Why wouldn't you want to do that? So I'm Adam Ringler. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I can't wait to see you on the next call. Thank you.